It's Danny Flexon here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by Tunde Ajayi, the trainer, of course, of Anthony Yarde, who not so long ago gave Artur Beterbiev a pretty tough fight. And we've just seen Beterbiev return to the ring against Callum Smith just minutes ago, a punishing seventh round stoppage. The corner of Callum Smith quite rightly wanted the fight over after the second knockdown. Just immediate reflections on the fight.
Well, first and foremost, respect Callum Smith for, stepping up to the plate and challenging himself. Most importantly, if you want to be the best, you got to fight the best. And I credit him for going over to another man's backyard, to be honest with you, and putting on such a brave and valiant performance. In terms of the fight, Dan, I've said it. I said it before. I said it on George Groves' podcast. A lot of people may thought I'm maybe being bitter or something like that. I wanted Callum to win. But for me, it was always down to the mental fortitude of Artur. That's where it is. And a lot of people don't understand that when you get, inside of a professional ring. You can have skills, things you've done previously against other opponents. You find out they don't work. And unless you have some kind of variation and movement and boxing and power, Arthur is going to just be a force that is going to reign for a long time. And I never subscribed to the opinion that he was slowing down. It wasn't. It was because Anthony Yarde was in there. And I looked at him on the scales, and I looked at him when he was walking to the ring and actually inside the ring, and I said, this guy actually looks in better shape for this fight than he did for Anthony's fight. He didn't even look like there was much put on him between weighing and fight night, but tremendous fighter, explosive, and I think it was the shock for Callum when he got in there and felt Arthur's punch power.
It seems like a strange thing to say about someone who's on a lot of people's pound-for-pound list. But do you feel Beterbiev may be a little bit underrated, particularly in terms of the technical side of his game?
I said this. Even in studying Artur for our fight against Ant, I spent hours watching every training session, going through their whole camp. I studied their whole camp, but obviously the main focus was Artur. And I said going into this fight and going into our fight when we had our team meeting, when you look at Artur, you can say he's not that technical. But when you actually do your research and your study, he's got tremendous footwork, tremendous balance, and his equilibrium is perfect. And people don't see that, much like Anthony, much like Yarde, because you're seeing knockouts, you think he's not a boxer. It took the Beterbiev fight to show that Anthony had great boxing skills. So certain fighters bring out certain things in you. And I think tonight we saw another component of Arthur's skill set, should I say.
What point in the fight did your hopes, your optimism for Callum Smith start to evaporate?
From the first round.
Wow.
If you go back and watch the first round, the very first punch Artur landed, there was a realization. And from that point forward, from the first round, I thought it was going to get stopped in the fourth. But credit to Callum, he stuck in there. But from the first round, I can just see he got hit with a shot and he didn't respond properly. And it was never going to be a fight he was going to win backing off from Artur. If you listen to Mark Ramsey in the corner, he actually said to Artur, don't let him box. Keep the fight close. Hence the 18-foot ring. So it's very tactical. Great game plan for Mark Ramsey and the whole of the team. And well done to them. On to the next. Hopefully we get the undisputed, which is what I certainly want to see.
And we'll talk about Callum Smith and his tactics in a minute, but what did Beterbiev do well? What were the keys to him winning the fight?
I'll be honest with you. His jab, I'm sorry, but people speak about Anthony. I'm just defending my man. He was timed with jabs so easily tonight. Sorry, my alarm's gone off.
That's it.
That's the 5 o'clock. That's the 5 o'clock alarm, Dan. Yeah, the jab was the major component for Artur tonight. He just couldn't miss. It was so timed, and I keep saying to people, you know, when you criticize fighters for getting caught with a jab, you got to think about who's throwing the jab and what kind of jab it is. Artur Beterbiev, Sergey Kovalev, these guys' left jab is like a right hand. Very hard to read. They don't load up on the left hand, and it's a snap. It's so hard, and you saw it was pushing Callum's head right back. And I think by the second or third round, Callum was already bruised up. You know, see, I think it was the second round. You know, he had his eye was very well bruised. But what a tremendous fighter, and credit to Callum again. I wanted him to win just for being, you know, a British fighter, regardless what his brother Paul Smith always has to say about me, because I don't forget. But that's not Callum Smith. Callum Smith is a very, very, you know, respectable, calm human being, someone who's ambitious. And I think it was a bit disrespectful to Artur to keep on talking about this catch, counter, left hook, as if, and Callum's power, as if Artur has not tasted power in 300 odd amateur fights and 19, well, now 20 professional fights, fighting fighters like Alexander Govostik. He's a puncher, you know, who ended the career of Adonis Stevenson. It was bizarre to me. It was always bizarre to me, but I just felt that let me just keep quiet to the post-fight, which is why we decided to do this after. And to see, you know, and even after the first round, I was still trying to edge on Callum. Come on, Callum, you know, work. But there was just no effect. The punches had no effect on Artur at all. It didn't even make him go back or anything. So it just shows 38 is young. 38 is young. It's age is just a number. That should be the headline.
What would you like to have seen Callum done more? I think once it got to kind of round 5 or so, the fight was over basically. But before that, to keep in the fight, what would you have liked to seen him do?
You know, boxing is the easiest sport to talk about, not so easy to do, Dan. You know, it's something I've always said. It's the most challenging sport out there. What kind of game plan do you devise for somebody who has power, speed, movement, timing, can box, sometimes relishes a fight? Not somebody he'll make you fight because he wants to fight. And I said it pre-fight, that Artur's a person, when you hit him, he gets motivated, you know, but he doesn't get motivated in an angry way. He gets motivated in a calculated way. Everything is hit with power. So there's not much you can say. I mean, listen, you can pull a man out of a pub on Old Kent Road and he'll probably say, go to the body, use the jab more, throw the right hand. These are just basic things you tell people. But as I always say, when you get inside that squared circle against another combatant, sometimes, as Mike Tyson says, you know, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And this man is a destructive force. I actually would love him to fight Ant again. Ant wants that fight because I know Ant, you know, mentally Ant's stronger. If the fight boiled down to mentality, and that's why I knew Callum Smith wasn't going to win this fight. But I know Anthony Yarde's mental fortitude has grown since that fight. And we saw how tough that fight was for Artur. You know, it was a back and forth fight. And I believe Anthony Yarde beats him if they fight again.
Now, we don't know if Callum Smith's trainer, Buddy McGurt, has ever spent time in a boozer on Old Kent Road. but he certainly had his own advice in the corner. One of which was to push Artur Beterbiev back, which is easier said than done. But also, he kept telling Callum to do that counter left hook to the body rather than to the head, because the catch counter left hook was scouted by Beterbiev's team. And Callum didn't really do that very much. It seemed like relatively good advice from the corner.
Well, I mean, look, what else are you going to tell him? Well, we've got to be real, Dan. I mean, sometimes people just overcomplicate boxing. The average man on the street who has a pair of eyes can just see is certain things are not going to work, because the guy who you're opposing won't let you do that, and that is the realization for fighters once they get in there. I never ever felt like that when Anthony was fighting Beterbiev. I always felt Ant was in the fight. It just that little lack of concentration for a split second, which is something you can't do at the elite level, especially not against a destructive puncher like Artur. But it wasn't bad advice. No, certainly not. And it probably was the right advice, but when you hit someone to the body, or you try to double up to the body, which is what Buddy was saying, and there's no movement, as a fighter, you're probably thinking, that ain't working. What else can I do? So, it was really, the writing was on the wall for me from round one. From round one, the writing was on the wall. And this was another stellar performance by Artur.
So, if Anthony Yarde gets his second shot, or some other fighter out there gets a chance to dethrone Beterbiev, what are the keys that they must have, the qualities or the strategy to beat him?
Box and power and mental fortitude. Anthony Yarde gave Beterbiev his hardest fight. And I hope people in the UK now put some respect on Anthony's name. It's like you're always disrespecting this young man. And this young man who has the least experience has given Artur his hardest fight. Sorry, I got a bit emotional there. I forgot the line of question because you disrespected my man. It's a disrespect. Again, Callum Johnson, the UK fighter, couldn't put up a resistance to Artur. Now we've seen Callum Smith can't put up a resistance. Anthony Yarde is the only fighter that has put a resistance and a dent in Beterbiev. And we want that fight again. We'll knock him out this time, I believe. He won't survive Anthony Yarde, because Anthony Yarde has grown in mental fortitude since then. Something you can't teach, you got to get in there and do it. And it proves again, no matter how much good warm-up fights you have, no matter how much preparation fights, you've got to fight the fight. And this is what I'm trying to say. When they talk about, Anthony Yarde, he keeps on doing the same thing, fighting nobodies, and then he fights a big one and loses. Well, I mean, what are we seeing? Has anything changed when these boys get and fight the bigger? No, because it's about if you can fight. Anthony Yarde, like Beterbiev, is a KO merchant who can really punch, and he's got skills, but that's what you need. You need cerebral strength. You need boxing IQ. You need power. You need real power to make a dent in this man. Boxing IQ, we'll see if Bivol can do that. But I see Beterbiev stopping Bivol again within 8 rounds.
Wow. That's a big shout. Do you see that as, Bivol's lack of one-punch power? Because boxing IQ seems to be there with Bivol. The mental strength appears to be there also. So is it that third tick in the box, the power, that's the issue?
Power is everything. Power is everything. My thing was, I wanted to see after 3 rounds, which is what I said, the effects of the Anthony Yarde fight. And there's no visual effects. He looked faster. he put shots together. I wouldn't say faster. I would say his shots were very timed, very precision. So yeah, Bivol is gonna try the in and out movement, but at some point you have to engage. And we see this with Gvozdyk. Gvozdyk done the same thing, tried the in and out movement. This guy has great footwork, great punching power, great timing. We see Bivol last week, the other week in Saudi, wasn't impressive. We saw him against Craig Richards. Craig Richards gave him a good fight. We do know Bivol's got levels. He seems to be a fighter that the better the fight he is, the better the opponent, the better he becomes. But again, I'm not falling for this, Bivol's so great and everything like that. No, I'm not. Arthur's power is the equalizer and his foot movement. And I believe him as well. The higher the level, the more you will see his boxing ability. So when he's confronted with the foot movement of Bivol and the punch output of Bivol now has to deal with the punch power and the precision of Beterbiev, and that will be the issue.
And just moving on to your man, Anthony Yarde, who we've already talked about a couple of times. He's due back, according to Frank Warren, on February the 10th on the Hamza Shiraz, Liam Williams show. Is that still on schedule?
If these opponents stop pulling out, like we've had like 7 pullouts.
Wow.
7 pullouts. And you got to remember, and I'm saying it here for a reason, Anthony Yarde will not be fighting a top 10 fighter of the world. People are forgetting that the fight is still not a year gone. It's almost a year, but it's not a year gone. And I want to see Anthony in another, you can call it a confidence builder. You can call it, I want to see how he responds to certain punches, sure. You know, and then we're ready. We're ready. So the opponent, I hope we're not topping a bill. So I don't feel why people think that we should be fighting a top 10 fighter for a 10-rounder. It's another building fight. And then bam, you're hearing it from Anthony, you're hearing it from me, you're hearing it from the team. You know, providing everything goes well in that 10-rounder, we're ready. We're ready. We're ready.
And Frank Warren also said he'd like to see Ant in with the winner of Joshua Buatsi and Dan Aziz, which takes place the week before, February the 3rd. What do you make of that fight? And would you like to see him against the winner?
Oh, yeah, I think we've gone past the stage now of what I've liked to see. A lot of people, times gone by have said that I'm overprotecting Ant and stuff. It's not. It's what a good manager does. You know, and it's not to say that this overprotection has made him underperform. On the highest stage, at the beginning of his career, he's fighting the elite champions. Kovalev is elite champion. Beterbiev is elite champion. He's not waiting to get to the end of his career. So, as I say, it's gone past the stage where it's like I'm losing control. Ant's like, Unks, I'm ready. I want that fight. I want that fight. I'm ready for the fight. He even went onto Sky's platform and said, come on, let's fight. And so we'll see. But either way, it's a massive pay-per-view fight. It's a fight that people have wanted for years. But it's all about timing. And this is AY's time. This year is his time to win a world title. And I feel be a force in the light heavyweight division. So Anthony Yarde versus Joshua Buatsi, Anthony Yarde versus Dan Aziz, whoever is victorious in that fight, we'll look at it. But let's get February the 10th out of the way first, and then and also they have to deal with their stuff the week before. And then we see. It's interesting, man. It's very interesting, very early in the year.
Who do you fancy in that fight, February the 3rd?
I'm feeling the vibes from Dan. You know, obviously Dan is more like family to me, but you know, I know how focused he is for this fight. I know most people think that this is gonna be a walkover for Buatsi. That's what they're thinking. But you know, based on the sparring sessions, based on the relationship, but sparring. When you get in there under the lights, fighting someone that you know sometimes it can be a disadvantage. Most times it can be a disadvantage. I've had that experience because the sparring partner who you've oft times beaten up or controlled in sparring now knows what you've got. So the punch, you remember years ago, Danny Williams versus Keith Long. I remember that fight. And, you know, Danny used to play with Keith Long in sparring, but literally play with him. And then it was a tough fight. You know, it went the distance. It was a tough fight. Myself, Junior McDonald versus Tommy Eastwood. Rest in paradise. I heard Tommy passed away recently. Junior used to play with Tommy. Come fight night, I think Tommy stopped him in 3 or 4 rounds. So, you know, sparring against your friend and then inevitably or eventually fighting your friend is never an indication of how the fight will go. But I anticipate a good fight, a 50-50 fight. That's the honest truth.
That's fair enough. Tunde, really appreciate you jumping on with me so soon after the fight.
Yes.
It'd be interesting to see what people comment and think about your reflections on the fight as well. And yeah, fingers crossed an opponent does step up to the plate for February the 10th.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, let's get ready for the bombardment. You know, one thing about my videos, you know, there's always going to be comments. So I love it.
You're thick-skinned, you're used to it.
Yeah. All right, Dan. Thank you for the interview.
Mate. Take care.